You are listening to the Enormocast.
So what's your tired excuse for not wearing a helmet? Too heavy? Not anymore. Too hot? You literally wear a beanie in your sweltering climbing gym, bro. Too dumb looking? Well, you might have me there. But you know what else is dumb looking? A cracked skull. So yes, 25 years ago, all those excuses might have had legs, but Black Diamond's modern helmets shut them all down. The Vapor, Vector, or Vision are all great lightweight foam helmets that do what modern helmets should do, which is make you forget they're even on your head. And if foam feels too flimsy, check out the more traditional full plastic and suspension half dome. No matter which you choose, they all sport sleek headlamp clips, UIA-rated protection, and a price point 1/1000th of your average head trauma surgery. But listen, the royal we at the Enormocast really just want you to consider getting your freaking brain wrapped in a helmet. And while we'd love for you to support Black Diamond, frankly, there's a lot of great lightweight helmets out there, and it's time to reconsider your prejudices for the old brain bucket, even when you're, quote, just sport climbing. So support the Enormocast by checking out Black Diamond's line of modern helmets at blackdiamondequipment.com or your local shop. But if you don't find what you like there, look around. And please, get your brain behind some foam and plastic before it's too late. In this time of pestilence, do you want to reach out to your friends, loved ones, and climbing partners with more than an anxious DM sent while slurping a soggy bowl of Captain Crunch at 2 a.m.? Then why don't you hit up friend of the show, Peter W. Gilroy, and send those socially distanced friends a climbing or mountain-inspired piece of handcrafted jewelry. Or maybe one of his famous titanium tricked-out trucker caps. Yes, titanium on a hat, people. Unique jewelry, hats, money clips, belt buckles, and more amazing accessories can be had with a discount and the bonus of supporting the Enormocast. So why don't you cheer up your pals with a nice surprise that won't glitch and freeze in the middle like an annoying Zoom conversation, and go to peterwgilroy.com or splitter-designs.com to check out the wares of a great artist and also a climber just like you. And enter Enormo at checkout for the hookup.
We gotta get
Listen, where you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
a
big
house. We
place,
sold
that
it
side
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,000 seats?
We really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is September 16th, 2020, about 10 o'clock here in Colorado, and this is episode 205 of the Enormocast. Still season 1, by the way. And on today's show, we have climber, musician, guide, Alexis Krauss. Another little curveball for most of you, I would imagine, not knowing who Alexis Krauss is. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. And this is another breath of fresh air interview like the last one with Favia Dubik. And I'm trying to pull those out, not talk about the doom and gloom. And so we're not even going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about, that we're in the prelude to the Road by Cormac McCarthy. We're not going to talk about that because you know what? I haven't even heard anything about cannibalism yet. Nothing, not a word. So we're fine. We are fine. And besides, if the cannibals do show up, we're climbers. We're stringy. We're like just not good eating. So we're going to be fine. No problem. So what's going on in Enormocast land? Nothing. Nada. Just getting the interviews and putting them out. Just trying to keep this thing rolling through the times. been sort of dialing in the remote thing. We got good sound on this one. Alexis is a musician, and so she was ready to rock and roll with some decent mics on her end, and turned out pretty nice. So since there is no business, let's just get to the interview with Alexis Krauss. Alexis Krauss is one half of a band called Sleigh Bells. Who's Sleigh Bells? Well, here's a moment of Sleigh Bells for you. Let me just drop you in the middle here somewhere. Let's see. That's some rock and roll right there. Nothing is wrong with your speakers, by the way. Alexis came on my radar when her now fiance emailed me a few years ago and suggested I talk to her. And she's out in New York State, upstate a little bit. And, I thought, yeah, if I ever get out there, do the thing with the Enormocast, show up, sit down. But then as soon as I started to kind of get a feel for what this meant, that I could call anybody and we could hook up anybody anywhere in the world, I started going back through the Rolodex, if you will, and thinking about some of these people. And I've also been trying to have a lot of women on the show just for the heck of it. Since, again, I can choose who I talk to, might as well stack that up a little bit, since that's one of the first sort of diversity problems with the Enormocast is a lot of dudes. So, putting more women on when I have a chance. And as many of you know, I'm a musician as well, kind of a hack amateur musician, but if you didn't know this, the intro and outro songs are both from an old band of mine. And a lot of the weird little blippy music that goes in here is something that I put together. So I was super excited. I'm always excited to talk to the musician types. And somebody as successful as Alexis Krauss is really someone who's going to be fascinating to me. I definitely had to pull myself away to talk about climbing. I could have spent 2, 3, 4 hours just quizzing her about gigs and shows and how they make their music and their partnership between her and her bandmate and all that stuff, which we got into. But we also talked a bit about climbing as well as some advocacy that Alexis does. It was just such a pleasure to sit down and talk with her, and I hope you guys enjoy this and get to know her. And since we're going to go out on one of Sleigh Bells' tunes, the rest of the song that I just played, instead of having an outro, I want to mention now that if you want to get into supporting young women who crush, which we're about to talk about in this interview, if you think of it at the end of it, you can go to Instagram and check out Young Women Who Crush on Instagram and go through their link on their profile to see how you can help out with that, which is something that Alexis has been doing for a couple of years and bringing young women from the city out to learn how to rock climb, bring them into the gym first and then head out. And it's been very successful when we get into it and something that's ongoing. So it's a sweet spot in this diversity charge that we are on, bringing those ladies out into the outdoors and to do something that they'd never thought was possible. Could bring some new climbers into the fold, and that's what we're looking for. So support that over there. Also, of course, when you're done with this thing, go on the deep dive into Sleigh Bells. I think there's 5 albums, lots of videos, lots of live performances. And once you hear this interview and you go back and try to square that with this woman you see on stage on those things, it's a lot of fun, actually. Not easy to do. Not easy to square them up, but they fit. They fit somehow. So, and we kind of start here in the middle of a story about Buddy Nielsen of Census Fail, who I interviewed a few years ago. Also a very successful musician, rock and roll guy who climbs. So this was related, and we ended up talking about that and just kind of rolling into the interview. So yeah, let's check it out. A very enjoyable talk, very uplifting talk with Alexis Krauss. The truth is that climbers live their lives off the rocks in approach shoes. Part comfort, part performance, part signaling to that lady across from you on the bus that you and the crazy free solo guy are essentially cut from the same cloth. That's right, lady on your way to Target. Don't you know I'm loco? That's why Sportiva has invented the most versatile approach shoe yet, the TX Guide. Sprinkling in DNA from their acclaimed running shoes, brilliant climbing shoes, and the legendary TX line, the TX guide for women and men can run to the climb, bash down the climb, all in time to climb into your stool on the patio of your local brew pub. So if you want to walk both streets and trails like a golden climbing deity, check out all of Sportiva's approach shoes at Sportiva.com or your favorite local shop. So yeah, he was all excited, and I actually drove. They had a gig. This was when people were gigging still, but in Denver, and drove down and talked to him backstage. So I felt like a full on rock reporter kind of dude, like Almost Famous kind of thing. So
definitely, yeah.
That was pretty fun.
Bringing the Enormocast to the yucky dressing room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's funny because I've always had that dream. That's been my like alternate universe dream. Yeah, has been to play music, and I played in bars and like that level of music for a long time. I mean, I took a break when I was on the road climbing a lot, but since I've lived here, I've been in a couple different bands that played for years.
Yeah.
Did the whole thing and like did the little sort of van tour around Colorado.
Of course. Those are the best. And you're right around the corner from Steve's Guitars because are you in Carbondale?
I'm literally right around the corner from
You're
Steve's
right around
Guitars
the corner.
right now, actually.
Such a good spot.
I'm in the same building. My wife, air quotes because we're not married, but this is her office. It's in the same building. So that's amazing. Steve's is like through the floor, just that direction over there.
That's so cool.
And have you played Steve's?
No, Sleigh Bells hasn't played Steve's, but I was out in Carbondale, was it 2 years ago for the No Man's Land Film Festival? And that was
right. Actually, I know that you were here because that was another time where I thought about the email that I'd gotten. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Yeah. So I was there and I did like a little DJ set there and it was rad, just cool dance party. And, but that venue just, was like, I would love to go back and play a set there. I mean, it would be loud. It would be uncomfortably loud.
Because I've watched all these videos, right? I was like, yeah, they'd be like, there's single pane windows too. It's like you'd be rattling the hell out of that place. But I love Steve. He's like the greatest guy. But I've sort of performed there in many different ways.
Sure.
And he can be very frustrating too. Like just the way he runs the show over there. You know, like you can show up and nobody's there, and like, I'm turning on all the equipment myself and like trying to figure out how stuff's run and like.
Oh yeah, it was like that when I showed up for the DJ set. I mean, because No Man's Land is like Aisha and Kathy are incredible, but it's a true like do it yourself festival.
By the seat of their pants kind of deal.
Oh yeah. And so they were out doing something, and Chris and I showed up, and I was like, okay, there's no one here, and so I was kind of looking at the booth, and we actually stayed there that night. We stayed upstairs. So we were like trying to find our room and like, trying to figure out where the cables were. And then he came in, and I mean, awesome guy, but it was like, he was pretty baked and just like,
oh yeah. It's so funny because it's that you just described like several of and I live here and I know the guy and he just is like, yeah, I'm not going to be there. I'll, whatever. You said you're going to be here. Yeah. Well, it's like,
exactly.
Anyhow, that's super funny. I didn't know that people actually stayed there. I didn't know he put bands up there.
I don't know if it's something that he normally does,
Probably.
But it was certainly set up. And I just remember it was pretty wild up there, like weird purple plush things, lots of like lava lamps and cool posters and records just everywhere. So,
he draws people in like sort of way below their pay grade, that come in and play that place, like,
but
but he's got like the lure and it's a cool spot, and Carbondale's awesome too. So
yeah, no, I would definitely go back there, and I can't remember the name of the venue. We've played it a few times. It's in Aspen.
Belly Up.
Yeah. And like bands will travel from all over the place to play Belly Up. And we didn't even really know about Steve's, but now if we can ever tour again, I would love to like play Belly Up and then do another show at Steve's.
Yeah, well, you seem like the we're recording this, by the way.
Yeah, it's fine.
It seems like the band Sleigh Bells. I've did the YouTube rabbit hole.
Which is terrifying.
I've done like 1,000. What's that?
I said, but that's terrifying. But continue.
It's incredible, actually, and and it's funny because I like my running joke about doing no research does not apply to you because You sent me some cool information and some videos to watch about some climbing, but also, then I just went down this rabbit hole to watch your videos. And then I was like, well, what do they do live? Because I was like, this is a band. It sounds like a studio thing. That's like a lot of electronic sounds, the drums and everything. And so I was like, okay, what do they do live? And then I saw you guys do, you had a horn section in at one time. At one time, it was just the two of you. And then sometimes there was like another guitar player, and sometimes there was like a bass player or something, So it seems like you have a versatility with what you do that you could probably like drop it into an acoustic show somehow.
We've never done an acoustic show. We've never done any sort of like stripped down. I think we did one session once for like the BBC, but we've never done an acoustic set. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. Like, I think some songs would be conducive to that, and it would be novel for a bit. But yeah, I mean, you're right. We have played. It's in the beginning. It was just Derek and I with an iPod. That's how unprepared we were. And a lot of people were just like, this is fucking karaoke. What is this? And so then we started running our beats and everything through a laptop and through Logic and got a little more advanced. And then finally we were able to assemble an incredible crew. And so then we had like a tech that was supporting us with Ableton but yeah, it's been Derek and I, and then a lot of times we'll play with another guitarist, either our buddies Jason or Ryan. We did tour with the drummer, an amazing drummer, Chris Maggio, for a year or two. And then we kind of went back to just being the two of us. So we're flexible in that sense. And I think, yeah, we've like, the live TV thing is always hard for our band because, so much of the experience of a live show with us is just very visceral. It's very loud. There's a lot of distortion. And so conveying that through a live audio feed has been tricky. So things like the horn section and the backup singers are definitely things that we've brought to like the live TV vibe that we normally don't do. I mean, right. I would love to tour with the horn section, but we could not afford it. But yeah, maybe one day.
Besides this too, it's like, I'm so envious. I mean, I've had bands, even just local bands that have 5, 6, sometimes 7 people. I had a band for like 10 years with a horn section. Yeah. And, it's a huge pain in the ass. And I'm always envious of like, oh, there are 2 people. Like, how easy is that? Like,
it's true.
Like I've been watching, Sophie Tucker. Mm-hmm. They've been doing their live feeds. Yeah. Like for hundreds of days now. And I dip in every once in a while, and they like seem to get along so well and everything else. But I'm always like, it can't always be like that.
Yeah. No, Derek and I, it's great that that's just the two of us. It makes decision making pretty easy. I mean, him and I, we're like brother and sister. I mean, we go at it for sure. Mm-hmm. And when we disagree, we disagree. But for the most part, we're very aligned, especially creatively. And we both treat people the same way, especially on tour, and just kind of I don't know, it's always been very easy to coexist on tour with him, and to make creative decisions. And yeah, the fact that the conversation is generally between him and myself and our manager or somebody else on our team. But then there are also times I'm like, oh my gosh, if I could just have like somebody backing me up right now. And I'm sure he's felt the same way.
Right. Like you turn to the other bandmates. You're like,
somebody please. You guys
are, there is no one here. Yeah. It's just me.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's totally true. Because when there are conflicts, you like recruit, like, oh yeah, Mark's with me. He understands where I'm coming from. Who else? Anyone else in the band going to come onto my side, which is even more unhealthy. And I know about it as like, again, a dude who plays bars in the Aspen Valley, It is cool that we've both played the Belly Up though.
Yeah. Belly Up. Yeah. Belly Up's a crazy venue. I remember the first time we played there, it was before I was climbing. It was before I had any experience with being at altitude.
Oh, geez. That's actually a big problem there.
Yeah. And I just, and I like, they have the O2 tank like hanging out, right? There's no backstage there. It's around the back of the building. So you're just hanging out like in the little wing there, and there's a bathroom, and then there's like this huge oxygen tank just right there. And I was like, what is that? Because I don't know. I was naive at that point. And we had come from Salt Lake City, I think. And I remember getting like 30 seconds in, and I'm a very physical performer, and there's like a lot of headbanging and jumping and screaming. And I remember like coming up like mid like headbang and just like gasping for breath. Somehow made it through without oxygen, but then every other time that we've played there, I'm like, you know what? Why not? Like, I'm just gonna take a couple breaths off of this, and it helps. It definitely helps.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's funny. I've always wondered how they treat actual like professional bands, because they treat local bands like shit. So the fact that no one ever bothered to maybe mention the oxygen to you as like an option is probably just part of the whole vibe there. I don't know, because I've like, we used to call it the prom queen, because we'd always like really want to play there. Yeah. And, you know, because it's an amazing, I mean, it's like the sound system there belongs in like, you know, a 2,000 seat club. Like, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like an awesome, and you get a light show and you get the whole thing. And and then every time we go up there, first of all, it's Aspen, which is, I think, a difficult town to play.
You think? Yeah.
Yeah. And it compared, like, Carbondale's a great live music town. Like, because you're the only thing in town. So people come out. But and every time I've done it, I'm just like, God, these people treat us like crap. Like, you know, just, we were lucky to even get that room, like the one off the stage, let alone let us into the damn green room, you know? So.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, I will say,
club, though.
It's a cool club, and it's intimidating, like the amount of people who have played there. And you're right. The PA there and the subs are unbelievable. Right. If you can get people off their asses from the pub tables to actually come down and dance, though, that's the problem. But we have like I think our last show there was rad. We had like enough kids, I guess, in that area knew about us, and they knew they were out to like dance and hang out and not like eat a cheeseburger while drinking a whiskey and Coke or something. But the guy who cooks, I can't remember his name, but he makes amazing food. He like went out of his way to make this like beautiful vegetarian curry last time we were there. And like, that was actually amazing.
That is totally true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And he's like actually like leaning out that window there, like making sure
exactly.
Like he's telling you things that other people should be telling you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, he's super awesome. And actually the curry, that must be his band thing, because, because we had the curry too last time I played there. And last time I played there, we actually got to use the green room. So it kind of cleared up some of my like vibe. Good. But I went like a whole decade of occasional gigs there where I was just like, this place. Yeah. But it is an amazing club. You mentioned climbing a second ago.
Sure, climbing.
So, and I want to, I'm going to like keep dragging you back to this.
That's
again,
fine.
because you've lived my alternate fantasy. Like if you could trade climbing for one thing, you know, I'd be like, oh, I would be a bass player and like, you know, I don't know which band, but that's what I would do. I'd tour the world as like Taylor Swift's bass player or something like that. So yeah, it's like a fantasy. I've dabbled with it. I've gone on the tours. I've denied a couple things that, you know, would have gone a slightly bigger maybe, but but let's talk a little bit about the climbing. It sounds like it's a more recent thing for you, because you said you were not a climber when you came to Aspen. And when did Sleigh Bells kick off?
Sleigh Bells kicked off in 2009. Yeah. And we started playing shows in 2010.
Cool. Let me also, I got to backtrack to the iPod thing.
Yeah.
That is so cool. And that, like, I remember a lot of people doing that actually, because it was like a cheap option.
Totally.
And the fact that you soldiered through that era of your career, if you call it that at that time, to become, you know, something as big as it's become is pretty awesome, because, you know, those glitchy shows where your iPad doesn't, or your iPod doesn't work right, and it's like terrifying, and like
oh my gosh,
to get through that zone is amazing actually.
Yeah, we got through it. There was always the dreaded when he would mouth talk to me, because we would just like, the iPod would just like, the subwoofer would be so aggressive that it would like rattle something in the iPod, and it would skip and so like there would be a malfunction, and Derek would just look at me like and just go, talk, and I would just be like, all right, now it's my time to just like ad lib with the audience. And then we started, I think we were on tour in the UK, and we started taking pieces of foam and like wrapping the iPod with foam and like gaff tape. I think one time we had like a banana or like 2 bananas, and we like put it with like the foam and the banana. So just jackassery.
Are you kidding me? You should have taken a picture of that, and that could have been an album cover.
I think there is a photo of that.
Okay,
maybe
good.
if I can, maybe I can dig that up and I'll send it to you.
That sounds like the cover of like a Beastie Boys album, though.
Yeah,
like that picture. But
yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, we were truly a band that came out of like the DIY blog culture of the early 2000s.
Right.
And Derek had been a touring musician for a long time. He was in a hardcore band called Poison the Well. So he had extensive touring experience, and I had
because he shreds.
Yeah. He's less of a shredder than Ryan Primack, who is the other guitarist and who actually plays with us. But yeah,
it's because he's running that like Jackson or whatever.
Totally. And don't get me wrong, he can shred. He can shred. But yeah, so when we started playing, at least as Sleigh Bells, even though Derek and I both had a lot of experience performing, it was just us. Like you mentioned those van tours, right? It was us and our manager, who was Derek's best friend from childhood. So it was Will and Derek and I in a van, with a guitar and a Marshall cab, and, a couple vocal pedals and our iPod. And we just started getting a lot of press. And so we got booked for these tours, mostly, opening for people and then doing some of our own stuff. And, we just didn't know anything. We didn't have any money. And so we didn't have a drummer. And that's how we did it, until it just became like a bit embarrassing, because we did get booked for like South by Southwest, and like all of a sudden we were in front of audiences that were scrutinizing us and judging us, and we were humiliating ourselves. So
apparently not enough to make people not want to have you come and play.
Yeah, I don't know. We just scraped by somehow. But yeah, but it was a blast. It was a blast. Playing some of those small clubs and sweaty venues. That's still my favorite thing about performing, is like performing in super intimate clubs where you just have that like palpable connection with the crowd. And I would sacrifice a good PA and like being able to hear myself for great energy in a room. Mm-hmm.
Which is what you have to do like 99.9% of the time.
Yeah.
When you're playing on that level of touring. Yeah. Come on. Exactly. No one can hear anything. So, but yeah, no, we started talking about climbing, and then I sucked you back to the thing. Cause I'm just like, no one can see me, but I'm like so excited to talk about this stuff. Cause I'm just like, oh man, a club in like Manchester. Like how cool would that be? Like, it's a dark, dank place, that freaking.
You think dressing rooms in the US are bad? Go to Manchester.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. In the winter. It's pretty rough.
That's what I'm talking about though.
But amazing.
That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to lay in the muck.
Yeah, warm beer and just the smell of piss. Yeah.
Love. Don't even think about love. Right. So cool. All right. Well, back to the climbing. So cool. You seem to have found it after this. And when I was thinking about framing this thing, I kind of just like, I started to see these facets of your life. And the thing that became interesting to me, and what I kind of want to hear about, is the integration of them, because I know from even just playing again music here in Colorado in bars, is that like I could blow my whole weekend after if I had a gig, because I wasn't going to get up and go climbing the next day kind of thing. And it actually, I've it's been a conflict even at that level. And then there's this place you came from, which was teaching fourth graders, which we haven't even talked about yet. So tell me about the climbing and how that appeared in the midst of being a professional musician in this band.
Absolutely. I started climbing when I was on tour, actually, and my best friend Nora and her now husband, they live in the Bay Area. And so her husband Diego had started climbing and had been out to Yosemite a few times and had a great mentor, and then was taking Nora out. And so Nora was just falling in love with climbing. And I was, at that point, I had started exploring the mountains of New York a bit more, because I grew up in New Jersey, and I grew up on the ocean. It was all about the ocean, and my family didn't camp. My family didn't know what rock climbing was. We were an adventurous family, especially my mom and I, but we were not like a outdoor recreation family. Like we had no awareness of that. And certainly no awareness of the Gunks or the Adirondacks or anything. So around that time I was touring heavily. And then when I would be off tour, I had just gotten a dog, and we were taking her on hikes, and we were starting to explore the Gunks and starting to like scramble and just like start, discovering how beautiful New York State is. And so it was like the combination of like having my dog and getting out on trail. And then Nora started climbing on the West Coast. And then on tour, I had a day or two off, and she took me climbing at one of the local Bay Area climbing gyms. And I was like, this is great. I love this. And then I came back through town shortly thereafter, and this was like 2013, I believe. And we were touring, I think it was Bitter Rivals, which was our third album. And they brought me to Mount Diablo, right outside of Oakland. And, we did like 3 single pitch routes, and it just like blew my mind wide open. It was this culmination of everything I had ever wanted to experience in nature. And I was hooked. I was completely hooked. And I got home from tour, and fortuitously there was a climbing gym that had just opened in Long Island City called The Cliffs. And I would bike there from Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And I just started climbing as much as I could in the gym. And because I had been outside, all I wanted to do was get outside. So I was like, I'm going to figure out whatever I can to get myself climbing outside. But I didn't know any climbers. I didn't have a mentor. I like to think that I didn't do anything too stupid. Like I was fully aware that I needed to like work through certain steps in order to get myself to be outside. But yeah, that was 2013. And I've been obsessed ever since.
That's pretty cool. And the thing that you just like dropped in there that was that like gave me goosebumps was like, oh, that was our third album. Just like, it's so cool. You have a bunch of albums. But yeah, so you at that point, I mean, I think there's this like vision that as soon as, you see a live band doing a certain level of something that they're rich and famous at that point. And, which is, I happen to know that is not true. And especially in, the era we live in now, which is, no longer about any sort of album sales or anything like that. It's all just about touring,
right.
Which is a hard life, and I don't know how you treated it in terms of, any sort of partying or anything else, but it always makes me interested in how someone, that's got that kind of schedule and everything sort of stays fit even for like an outdoor pursuit or a pursuit like that.
Yeah.
Once you got really into climbing, did you find any sort of like conflicts between the lifestyles, or were you able to sort of find enough time to climb to keep you happy? Yeah,
no, I mean, I am, I'm not sober, but I am not a drinker. I don't do drugs. I live a pretty clean lifestyle on tour, which is definitely like a juxtaposition from a lot of our band and crew. But like before I was climbing, I would wake up early. I would bring my bike on tour. I would bring my dog on tour. So for me, tour was this incredible opportunity to like literally, especially once we started touring on a bus, because that changes everything, because then you're not driving all day in a van, right? Like you're actually driving overnight and then waking up in a new city, which is just phenomenal. And so we'd wake up at 8 a.m. in Phoenix or, Salt Lake City or wherever. And it would be like, how can I hike? How can I adventure? How can I get the dog out? Like, how can I swim? Like, what can I do to enjoy the day? So I was generally like up early. And then when I started climbing, it was like, okay, like day off for sure. I'm climbing. Right. And I got, our tour manager, AJ, and our front of house engineer, Patrick, who are two of my closest friends, and they started climbing with me and they fell in love with it. So, it was like, I mean, I wasn't bringing a full rack on tour, but like, where's the closest sport crag? How can we get there? Can we Uber there? Do we have to rent a car? Like, how do we climb? So in a weird way, like the only conflict for me was like, okay, Alexis, like don't fuck up and get hurt, right? Or like this is not the time to sprain your ankle or do anything. So we wouldn't embark on anything too serious.
It seems like, all honesty, and you mentioned this earlier, like what you're doing on stage seems way more dangerous to your limbs, anyway, because you do not stand still on stage.
No,
so.
I'm in the crowd. I'm on the crowd. I'm on the barricade. I mean, I've fallen off stage before, and you're right. I mean, the time that I thought
plenty of people in your business have done that, right? They fall off, and break something, and all that. Yeah. Just Dave Grohl comes to mind.
Yeah.
His big chair that he toured in after that. So
exactly.
Yeah. So that's pretty funny, but I mean, I get it. You're just like I owe this to my bandmates not to go out and get wrecked.
Exactly. And my bandmate, like, he hates that I climb. I mean, he's supportive, but like to him, he's not a climber. And I'm sure you've experienced this plenty in your life, but like non-climbers in your life who just like do not understand what you're doing and how it's not anything but horrifyingly dangerous.
Right. It's an undue risk that you're taking.
Yeah. But climbing and touring were not mutually exclusive by any means. And it was, it's been a great way, as it's an outlet for me, for sure. And just a way to like reconnect with nature when I'm on tour, because as much as I love venues and being in clubs, I'm very much an outdoor person. And that's for me, like, that is how I calm my anxiety. That's how I deal with whatever emotional challenges I'm dealing with on tour. So just having that outlet was really powerful.
Well, let me ask you this about the sort of, you've got your partner in the band who's, doesn't have that much of a clue. You've probably tried to inform him about climbing and what it all means. But, you've got also like two very different communities, especially I think it seems like, well, the image I have, right, is, and I've been watching your videos, it's like it's everything like, I look at your pictures of climbing and the videos of climbing, and then I see your videos of what you're doing on stage, and it's just like, holy cow, is that the same person? Like it's really wild, and you're glammed out and, full rocker wear. And I don't know if those are part wigs or extensions, but you look
all my own hair.
Really?
Yeah.
How does it get? I mean, I'm looking at it right now. How does it get so straight?
I mean, I haven't had my hair done.
Okay. All right. Yeah. It's all right. We're in a pandemic.
It's a hair straightener. And,
cool.
It's just.
I mean, when I post this episode, I'll certainly post a picture from Sleigh Bells. But, it's like, it's, a completely divergent look anyway.
Yeah. I once had we were playing the Metro once in Chicago, and this was early on, and I had like a critic. He just gave us a terrible review. He hated our band. And he called me like a demented Tiffany, which, and then he like went on this whole just like rant about how I should be in like Pantene Pro V commercials and not performing because, my hair was too shiny or something. So yeah, it's real.
Right. Now the sort of indie rock critic scene. It's got to be the worst.
Yeah, cantankerous indie rock critics.
I have friends because I grew up in Libertyville, Illinois, so North Chicago. Friends that moved downtown to pursue music. Yeah. I've stood at the Metro with my ears bleeding many times. But yeah, the whole indie rock critic thing. Anyway, but yeah. So what I was going to ask you is sort of kind of navigating between the two communities. Yeah. Now you're pretty ensconced in the climbing community there up in the Hudson Valley, is what you just told me. Living up by New Paltz. So I mean, what are sort of your I don't know, observations about the two worlds, and what does it feel like to walk back and forth in between, this kind of like full on stage promotional sort of scene of playing live music, because it's all about, keeping your name out there going. Sure. And, it's really great that you came on the Enormocast, because I imagine maybe not right now, but, interviews have to be this like kind of big drag on your free time. So I appreciate you coming in here. But, so what is it like to navigate the two scenes and walk back and forth between them?
Yeah. The climbing community has filled, I don't want to say it's filled a void, because I don't want to make it sound like I wasn't fulfilled by music, but climbing for me kind of became obviously a personal, self-indulgent, selfish kind of outlet, as climbing is for so many people, right? It's like, why are we doing this? We're doing it because it makes us feel incredible. But I was a teacher before I was in Sleigh Bells, and climbing for me doesn't exist without like community and without education and without outreach and without kids. And so the ways in which I've become most connected with the climbing community are through those spaces. And so climbing has kind of like, I was really upset to leave teaching, as much as I knew that I wanted to give Sleigh Bells a chance and that I really wanted to, fully make the band my life. I definitely left behind something really special to me when I left the classroom. And so in a weird way, like getting to not just climb and have that personal escape and that personal quest for adventure and beauty and connection with the natural world, but to then be able to connect that with youth education and my own personal education and teaching and mentoring in the climbing community, it's like been this beautiful way to integrate what I love to do and also like go back to being an educator and going back to, serving communities in meaningful ways. So I feel like climbing just like made me complete.
Right.
And it distracted me from, the music industry is, it's such an egotistical industry. And there are a lot of people doing great work in music, and music certainly does change lives. And we've had so many fans tell us, like, without this song or without this album or without this show, like, I maybe wouldn't be here right now. So I don't want to downplay the role that music has as a powerful force for good in people's lives. But it can be a bit like empty on tour, right? And finding purpose in music, and especially now in this world of like shameless self-promotion with social media and the competition that exists with live streaming and getting playlisted and all of this. And there's a lot about the music industry that I just really despise. And so the climbing community just kind of balances that out for me. Which, I mean, both are like pretty ego driven. So I know for some people they'll be like, what? But climbing is not exactly the most like altruistic thing to be doing.
We haven't put the last piece of the puzzle in yet, is why it may seem that way. But let me wait to get to it, because I want to ask about a couple of things that you just said. When you said being on tour is like empty, is really interesting, because obviously there's the Bob Seger song, like Turn the Page, right?
Yeah.
It's like that's a theme of that whole scene of this, like the thrill of stage and then these empty moments in between, and how, I mean, that's, right. It destroys people, like literally right. destroys them, right? That's the story of rock and roll. You've obviously managed to keep a healthy avoidance of that feeling. But, I was looking for this integration thing, and, you just answered that question of like how putting that in between these gigs and on this tour, putting this outdoor outlet into your life. I mean, it's like you could write a book about that, how to survive a tour, how to survive that kind of thing, because it seems ideal in so many ways to put that in there.
Yeah. I mean, it's all too easy. I think what you said, you mentioned like you have this intense catharsis that lasts for like an hour, 2 hours every night. Right. And then the rest of your day and night is just like your night after is coming down from that and processing it all. And then the whole next day is just the expectation of doing it again. And so it is this like very, emotionally, chemically, right? You're just constantly dealing with these highs and then the come down, and then being homesick, and then dealing with whatever, drama there is. and we're pretty drama free, but it's tour. There's always drama. And so then being outside and just touching rock and being so incredibly focused on that in that beautiful meditative way that climbing allows us to like focus, but yet completely check out, was very healing, was very just like therapeutic for me. And just fun. But I don't know. I just, both climbing and music have just become such equally important, powerful forces in my life. It's hard to like imagine one without the other at this point.
Yeah. I mean, and that's wild because, you know, you embarked on this Sleigh Bells thing and it grew. And, like you said, it was around your third album that you found climbing. Which I think, again, like sounds like perhaps was ideal. You know, you had the time and the dedication and the focus, and it was the only thing in your life, I would imagine, because just knowing, you know, going from iPod to the next level, I mean, it takes everything you have. Like it takes everything you have, which is why most people don't make it, right? Make it past the iPod level. But then I think, like, you know, it seems like that just arrived at the right time to where, you know, honestly, like, let's talk about, you know, the behind the musics, right? You know, the VH1 behind the musics, like right around the third album, like shit goes haywire for like a lot of bands, you know?
Yeah.
So here's this thing that sort of comes into your life that allows you to create a balance. And the loss of balance seems to be the problem in the music industry, right?
Sure.
Where things go topsy-turvy at some point for a lot of people, even touring on the level that you guys were touring. So
yeah, and we also, I mean, I think there was tour that introduced me to climbing, but it was also around the end of that album cycle for Bitter Rivals that we took the longest break that we had ever taken, and we were actively writing and recording, but we were out in California for a little bit, and just there was this big period of like, oh my gosh, we had just spent 3 years pretty much continuously on the road. And now we had this space and this time. And so climbing occupied a lot of that space and time.
Here, hold on a second. The sun is
blasting you.
Like, hold on a second. It's coming. I'm like leaning further and further out of the camera. Yeah, I just got to slide over. Just a sec. It's actually cool here right now, but 2 weeks ago, you would have saw me just like burst into flames.
Yeah.
In that beam of sun. Yeah. But it's pretty nice here this weekend. So, okay, what were we? You were just.
I was just
sorry,
saying,
we were getting deep, and I just fully interrupted it.
It's all good. No, I was just saying how like having some space from not being on tour, because we did take a big break. And so that allowed me, like, that's when I started trad climbing, right? Like, that's when I was able to be like, okay, I can focus on climbing in a way that I hadn't been able to before. And also, you know, it's weird with music, like when you're off the road and when you're off tour, like you go through this, you're like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing with myself? You know, like I'm not touring. And yes, you're working on new music and you're writing and recording, but like, that's when I started really stepping up with like the outdoor education work. And cause I was like, I gotta do something. Like I can't just be home. I have to, like, I need to work. I have like a productivity problem where that's definitely like, I need to be doing something. And so that was kind of how the guiding happened and everything sort of, you know, and Young Woman Who Crush developed was with that time of being off tour, because there's no way I would have been able to do it while touring so much.
All right. Well, you just brought up the puzzle piece that I was missing, that I said we were missing, is because we hadn't brought it up yet. And when you were talking about, you know, climbing being essentially egotistical as well as music, but, you know, once again, it's like, I don't know, you have a lot in you in terms of, it seems like, whether you feel like it was random or not, but recognizing a need in your life and going out and fulfilling it, because you did start or co-found an organization that helps young women find climbing. So let's talk about that, because it seems like that was sort of the final piece to to a balance, really. I mean, a 3-part balance, if you will, but putting that in there.
Yeah. Gosh. Young Women Who Crush was started in 2017, and it was the result of I had been working with an outdoor guiding adventure company that was based in New York City, and we had a week called the Women in the Outdoors Week, which was raising awareness about women in the outdoors, and we had backpacking workshops, and we had trips, and then we had climbing events that were in partnership with the Cliffs, which was a community that I had gotten really involved with. And so we had a mentored climbing night that we put together, where we just had a lot of lady crushers in the community get together, and people could sign up who weren't climbers or who were climbers but were just looking for some mentorship and for some community building. So we had this one night of mentored women's climbing, and the woman at the Cliffs who had founded this Lady Plus Crushers group, her name is Eva Kalea, and her and I, we started communicating and working together, and just the event went so well, and we really realized wow, there's a need for this mentorship model of climbing here. There's just so many people that they don't know how to find that community, and they want to be climbing with other women. So Eva and I started chatting about well, if this was so powerful for adults, imagine how powerful this could be for youth. And so we started brainstorming, and then connected with Emily Varisco, who's our other co-founder. And Emily is actually from Colorado, and she had been a competitive climber and had gotten into youth coaching. And so she was one of the head climbing coaches for their youth team at the Cliffs. And so we brought Emily into the conversation. We're like, hey, will you help us design a curriculum? And let's take this event that we just did with women and bring it to New York City kids. And so through the company that I had been involved with as a guide, we had connections with New York City public schools. And so we reached out to one of our teachers. His name is Don Overly. He's an environmental science teacher at Central Park East High School in Harlem. And we were like, hey, Don, we want to launch this climbing program for girls. Would you mind if we came into the classroom and chatted with some of your students and gauged the interest? So the three of us went up to the school, and he told a bunch of his students about it. And we had this meeting in the classroom, where we're rock climbing, you guys interested? You want to try it? And we got 6 girls who were stoked. So we, picked them up from school one day and rode the subway to the Cliffs, and we had this mentored climbing session. And it was just I don't know. It just was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had. Just bringing girls who, had never experienced climbing, didn't know what climbing was, getting them into the gym, allowing, the mentors to have this experience bonding with these mentees. And so it was supposed to just be a one-off night. And then after that, we were like, no, this has to continue. So that year
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah, please.
What was your pitch like?
What was our pitch?
To the girls. What was your pitch like? What did you... I mean, you have an ability, I think, to raise a crowd up. So you probably used a little bit of that, but...
I don't know if I can't remember if I was more in teacher mode or
right. Well, either way, you had the skills.
Yeah. No, I mean, we just were up there and we're like, have you ever heard of rock climbing? And I'll never forget one of our girls who is a dear friend of mine, Marjana. She's now a junior in college. I think she was a senior at the time. And she's from Bangladesh, and her best friends, Marwa and Tamina, were there. And they were like, what is this rock climbing you speak of? They just had no idea, she had come here from Bangladesh when she was 10 and had only known the Bronx. But she had this incredible relationship with nature back in Bangladesh. And so when we showed photos, we did a slideshow, and we're like, this is the gym, but you can climb outside. And it was just what is this? I want to experience this. So I think our pitch, rock climbing pitches itself, right? Especially with kids.
Right. Yeah.
And you're what? Cool. I get to climb up walls and, look like a badass. So there was just a lot of interest, and we continued the program with this small group in the Cliffs, and the Cliffs was, kind enough to give our girls memberships. And then we decided that we wanted to culminate the year with an outdoor trip to the Gunks. And so we worked with a good friend of mine, Doug Ferguson. He runs a business called Mountain Skills Climbing Guides here. And we reached out to Doug, and he was like, yeah, sure. And so we got the girls out, and like two of the girls, Marjana and Litzy, that I'm both super close with. I'll never forget Litzy, climbing up, and she got to a ledge, and there were blueberries on the ledge. And she was like, "Are these blueberries?" And I was like, yeah. And she was like, can I eat these? And like, she just had this moment where she was like, taking in the view, just eating blueberries. And they were just like, they got to rappel for the first time. They got to see like on top of the white cliffs of the Gunks looking out the Hudson Valley. And it was just such a transformative experience for them. And then we just continued to grow the program, so that the following year we worked with 3 additional schools. And then this year, for the first time, we made it like an open application for any New York City public school girl or gender nonconforming youth. And so, yeah, it's just grown to be this pretty amazing community. And we've gotten a lot of support from the climbing community, a lot of support. So yeah, that's Young Women Who Crush in a nutshell.
That sounds awesome. I mean, it's like, I think it's hard to fathom, as someone, I live out here in the West, so many climbers they come from outdoorsy backgrounds, like, we, as a family, we hiked or whatever. And just to understand how sort of unfamiliar with nature and with outdoor spaces as we understand them, not Central Park or not, a green space in the middle of a city, but an outdoor space as we understand them is, it's hard to fathom that, kids that are 15, 16 years old have like no experience even walking on uneven ground.
Absolutely.
It's like, and you're just like, what? And like, no, they don't. They live in a city, and that's where they live,
Yeah.
It's
for
not
a
in their
lot
family's background to go out into nature or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for so many of our girls, it's the only time that they get outside to experience the outdoors. I mean, we went camping for the first time last year, and that was just incredible and hilarious in so many ways. But yeah, everything from like seeing millipedes to seeing spiders to like, oh, there's fruit that grows here that I can eat, to touching rock. I mean, there's so many new experiences and challenges and things that can be really scary for them to overcome. But there's also like, a lot of our kids are immigrants, and we climb with a group of girls from Nepal, and like it's been this really amazing way for them to like reconnect with their experiences in nature as younger children before coming to New York City. So whether it was in the Dominican Republic or in Nepal or Bangladesh or wherever they were from, like those are often where they were running around barefoot, and like they were kids and they weren't living in, New York City and in their apartments. And especially now with COVID, and so many of our kids, live in neighborhoods that were like the epicenter of this pandemic in New York City. And just literally didn't leave their apartments for 2 months because people were just dying around them.
Right.
And so, especially now, like we did 2 trips to the Gunks, and there were just a couple moments where like they would top out and they'd be hanging out, and they were just like, I'm going to remember this because I'm going back to my apartment, and like this view is so spectacular. So yeah, I mean, we all know what climbing does for us, right? Like, and just take that and then amplify it, times 100 in terms of, being out in nature as a city kid. So yeah, it's a powerful program, and we have ambitions of, we want to get the girls out west. We want to take them like either to Smith Rock or Red Rock, and just kind of continue to evolve as much as we can.
Yeah, that'd be incredible. What an incredible trip that would be,
right?
to get them that far away from home.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's the other thing about city kids is that, it's like they get their neighborhood's kind of their whole world, other than what on the internet. And and on television or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like your whole world is these several blocks. You know, your school's there, your house is there, the parks are there. And to expand out into the world would be incredible. And it's cool. You know, you're talking about going camping, and, you know, I always think of like camping as this sort of byproduct of being a climber. You know, you don't, the camping is, you know, you just need to spend the night because you're going to go climbing tomorrow. And yeah, you enjoy it, and everybody's got their rigs, and it's kind of a science in its own way, but we don't think about it as this like incredible experience that a kid that's never done it might think about it as, you know? So yeah. And it's just taking like all this stuff for granted, is what it comes down to. But in our defense, it's sort of human to, you know, to take all that stuff for granted in a lot of ways, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. We know what we know. We get comfortable with what we know, and stepping out of that comfort zone has been huge for them. And it's been great for them too, to like step into, you know, especially now with Black Lives Matter and like this recognition of the need to like create more inclusive communities in the outdoors, and increase access to youth and to people who generally have not had access to a lot of these spaces that are so incredibly like amazing, but super privileged, because climbing is expensive and traveling to crags can be expensive. And, you know, there's like the dirtbag lifestyle, but like there's also like, you know, having a membership at a climbing gym is expensive. You know, all of these things add up. So like for our girls too, there's a lot of like, they see this as like them being advocates for diversifying climbing, and for like seeing girls climbing in hijabs at the Gunks is like not a common sight. Right. And so,
yeah, that was really interesting in the video. That you sent, which I'll post with this episode.
Awesome.
People should check out. But yeah, that was like, oh yeah, you know, that's how it has to be done. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
And I've never seen that in the wild, so to speak.
Right.
But yeah, it was super cool.
Yeah. So there's a lot of climbers up here, especially, they're like, oh, whoa, it's really cool to see like this, you know, degree of like cultural diversity happening here.
Yeah. She had a little helmet on top of it.
Yeah. She's actually like working right now with, I don't know if I should be saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. She's working with Outdoor Research right now on like developing like a women's climbing hijab, like so that it's, so like this is like, these are the places you go, right? Like people, representation matters for that reason, because, you know, when people start seeing other people that don't look like them, like that's where they find their empathy and they find their curiosity, and like climbing evolves to like meet the needs of climbers who aren't traditionally represented. So it's been really cool for them to like step up into that space. And, you know, they like run the Instagram, and throughout COVID, like we had virtual meetings, and they were out on the streets protesting. And then like, we were like talking about climbing. So it was just like a really cool way to synthesize advocacy and rock climbing.
It sounds like you had this mission where you're like, oh, I love rock climbing, and I think it would be great to show these girls, these women, as they grew up rock climbing. But then it sounds like you probably didn't even understand the depth of which the different ways in which it would change their lives, and different ways it would also like surprise you. You know, it's one thing to be like, oh, I think they'll just really like climbing, and we should take some girls climbing. And then you're onto this like, you know, this climbing this cultural mountain. It's like, it sounds like it blossomed into something where you're probably like laying awake at night going like, holy shit, that happened today too, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're a dad though, so like you get it, right? Like, you know what it's like to work with kids and just to have your mind blown open by their wisdom and insights. And like, I mean, as they get older, you know, I mean, it's the same thing. Like working with kids has always been, for me, I just learned so much from them. And especially now working with high school students, who are just developmentally in such a fascinating place. And, but yeah, they're making all of these discoveries, and they're running with things. You know, they're taking climbing now and bringing it to they're joining climbing teams at their local colleges, and they're like bringing, you know, what they've learned through Young Women Who Crush into the climbing community. They're like they just run with it. They just run with it. And, it's beautiful. It's really beautiful to watch. And that's what I love about working with kids, because they just like keep you humble, and they just keep you constantly checking yourself and your own ideas of like what it means to be an adult and like have your shit together. And like, you know,
I try to remember that whole thing when I'm fighting with Miles to go to bed tonight. I'm like, I should be gaining wisdom from this, but really, I just want you to go the fuck to sleep. But there's something to be learned here.
Right.
Alexis told me I should be listening. It's 10 o'clock. I'm still listening to you, not going to bed.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been wonderful. It really, it's the thing that like brings me the most fulfillment in climbing for sure.
Okay. What we are, that's like I said, it seems to be sort of at least at the moment, a piece of the puzzle that needed to be placed in there, you know, when I was talking about how the evolution kind of happened. But let's talk a little bit anyway about you and your climbing.
Sure, yeah.
Your personal, because you mentioned it is an egotistical sport, and you know, you have to have motivations because it can be an uncomfortable sport, if you want to call it a sport. I mean, it can be uncomfortable that it actually physically hurts you. It also is uncomfortable in that you're forcing yourself into situations where you're scared and all those sorts of things. So what does your personal climbing look like? You sound like you're a gunky and therefore a trad climber.
Yeah.
But like, what are your personal goals like in terms of how you approach climbing and what you enjoy and what you want to get out of it for yourself?
Yeah, I am definitely a Gunks climber. I am definitely I'm a trad climber. I started as a gym climber and then as a sport climber. And I will never forget, I was leaving Red Rock one time after like a sport climbing trip there and was driving around the loop road, and I was looking out at like Cat in the Hat and Birdland and like that Pine Creek area. And I was just looking at all those summits, and the sun was setting and the rock was just exploding in that beautiful orange way that it does there. And I was like, I want to go climb that stuff. And I'm not going to be able to climb it as a sport climber. Because I'm not a super strong climber. And for me, like, sport was going to be just, I don't know. I saw it as limiting at that point. And for me, climbing was less about like, how hard can I climb and like, how big can the adventure be? And what amazing things can I see? So I came back to the Gunks, and I, through a series of like weird serendipitous events, was able to meet some mentors, some other women, like this like older crew of lady crushers in the Gunks that have been climbing there for, 30, 40 years, some of them. And so they were kind enough to kind of mentor me and help me out. And I was definitely like one of those trad leaders. I worked my way through the grades. I mean, I started with like Gunks 5.3, and just made my way up. And for me, that's always just kind of been like a mental, physical progression that has worked for me. And that's why I love the Gunks, because you can have epic adventures on a 5.5 and it feels like real climbing. And so I am, now like just breaking into 5.10 at the Gunks, which for me personally has been this thing that I never thought I would achieve. I just like 5.10 was just always the grade that I would never access as a trad climber. And so that's like just now this season feeling possible for me, which is really exciting. And I think I've had this like mental switch where as long as I know my gear is good, and from the most of the time my gear is good. And so now that I trust my gear placements, I'm willing to go for shit and fall. And like, as long as it's G and I'm like feeling pretty comfortable, I've been going for things in a way this past, like since quarantine ended, in a way that I haven't been, which is exciting and feels really good. But, yeah. And I owe a lot of that to my fiance, my partner, Chris Voltaggio, who I've been a huge mentor and influencer. And he's the first person, like, really since I started climbing, that climbs way harder than me. So being able to consistently climb with somebody who's better than you, has been huge for me. It's been infuriating, don't get me wrong, at times, but it's made me a much better climber.
That's a careful relationship to have, I think, at times. But yeah, well, pretty soon, you guys, the COVID thing will be over and you'll go back on tour and get weak again.
Yeah, so exactly.
Then you'll be host.
Yeah, I might as well get strong now while I'm not working.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's awesome to give yourself, over to these causes and this thing, the young women who crush. But I think to stay motivated in climbing, you still have to have your own goals.
Yeah,
it can't
absolutely.
be. I say that from someone who's known a lot of burnt out guides.
Yeah.
Because all they do is do stuff for other people.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
So you got to, back to this balance thing that we keep coming back to, or I keep coming back to. That's a big part of it. So let's talk a little bit about music then.
Yeah.
Mentioning how like touring is the thing over the last decade as the music industry changed, and you guys are not able to tour.
Mm-hmm.
What does music look like for you right now and for Sleigh Bells?
Yeah. So right before everything shut down, we were like just finishing our newest album. So we were actually mixing in California with Andrew Dawson, who's a great friend and an engineer that we've worked with for a long time. And so we were working, and our last day was Friday, and we took a trip. Chris and I took a trip to Joshua Tree, and we climbed Saturday, Sunday, and then Sunday night was like the day when like the world just felt like everything was like, okay, we're headed towards a complete and total immobilization. And so Sunday night we were like at a Del Taco outside of Joshua Tree. And we had to decide that we were going to cancel / postpone our wedding and decide that we were going to fly home from mixing our album. So we flew home, we cut mixing short and came home. And then we were just in this weird holding pattern of like, okay, well, when can we finish mixing? And it was during that time, my bandmate's really great about just like, he's like, we're going to keep writing. And so, he kept sending me tracks, and fortunately he lives not far from me up in Kingston. So I was going to his place and we just kept recording and writing. Then we got things in a place where we were able to like fly back out to Arizona to finish mixing with our engineer. And so we did that back in June. And now, honestly, it's just kind of like we're just planning for when we can actually make videos. Like, when can we get a crew together to just do things and start properly supporting the music? And hopefully we want to release, we're being told like we can't even think about playing shows until like July of 2021. That seems to be the consensus amongst booking agents and, whomever, that like that's when venues are possibly going to be open. So we're just kind of like waiting. We're waiting.
Yeah, but imagine the pent up desire.
Yeah, there's a lot
that
of
people
it.
are going to have for music. I mean, I can only imagine, if there is some sort of like definitive green light, but I can't, it might just sort of, dribble into, which wouldn't be as good. But there's some sort of definitive like vaccine green light or something like that. It's just going to explode. And so like being sort of like poised for that, could be pretty wild actually.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and so we're ready. Like, we're ready. We have new music. We have like, it's just like
you got your straightener warmed up.
Yeah.
Your hair straightener's like already plugged in.
I got to like dye my hair, get rid of all these grays and straighten my hair, take off my like dirty climbing pants.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we're just waiting. And, admittedly, like, we're not the best band as far like when it comes to engaging on social media and like doing sessions. And a lot of the times like our music isn't the most conducive to a stripped down thing. So, and because we like don't want to debut new music in that way, like we want to give it a proper introduction to the world. We haven't like been super active in terms of like live streaming stuff. And, but I think that's an edge for us. Like, that's a space that we don't love. And so I think we're going to have to step into it. Right. Or else we're just going to not be able to engage, because who knows how long it's going to go on. But
sure.
But I will say that like, this is my most favorite album that we've made. I unfortunately can't say when it's going to come out or how, but it's my favorite. I think it's, we're both proud of it. So It's going to be real fucking fun to play live whenever that day comes.
Well, awesome. Alexis, thanks so much for joining me on the Enormocast.
You're welcome.
It did happen through Chris. He actually emailed me several years ago, and I just kind of, and when you mentioned that you were in Carbondale, I remembered that now, that because I was here, and I actually I sometimes help out with actually PA work for the No Man's Land Film Festival.
Yeah.
And probably did for something on that as well, but yeah, and so I'm really glad that it happened, and that the one silver lining of the pandemic, of a few actually, I'm going to admit, there's I'm glad that people don't get in my space anymore, just in general. But yeah, is that I've been doing these things remote, and so I've been able to connect with people that are in New York like you are, and instead of some future possible trip to the Gunks that I might possibly take, And then the other thing is when I go on these climbing vacations, and I spend, every night like chasing somebody down to do an interview. So they're not always fun vacations.
Yeah.
So if I do go to the Gunks, we can hang out and not do an interview. It would be more fun than maybe doing this. So
yes, when you're ready, come out. We'll climb, and next time we're in Colorado, maybe it'll be at the Belly Up, and we can
that'd be
get
sick.
a beer and
yeah, that'd be awesome. You get to come in early, maybe get some curry.
Yeah, seriously.
But let me ask you this as the last thing. If people want to support young women who crush, what do they have to do? Where do they have to go?
Yeah. So you can check out our Instagram, which is instagram.com/youngwomenwhocrush. We have a link in our bio about how to donate. And
okay, cool.
Yeah, so there's a link there, and that'll stay updated in terms of our different fundraising campaigns. And if you're in the tri-state New York City area and you want to potentially mentor or donate some shoes or whatever, you can always message us on Instagram. That's the best way. And then there is also a contact page on the cliffs. So, but I'll share that information with you.
Cool. Yeah, I'll just put it with the post. No one, I don't know how many people look at the post, but
yeah. Either
way, if you want to support, this thing that, is this fundamental part of what we've been talking to with the Black Lives Matter thing is just introducing, these, in this case, young women of sort of diverse racial backgrounds to climbing. And like you said, to have us go to the cliff and see people that look like them is probably a really inspirational thing, and what needs to happen in climbing at this point. So This is a direct conduit to doing that. No talking about it. They're actually doing it, which is,
it's true. They're doing it. They're doing it. And it's been really great to see like outdoor companies step up too, like we work with Evolve and Cliff Bar, and it's just like, it's rad to see like the climbing community be like, oh yeah, this isn't just like a problem that we don't have to engage with. Like this impacts us as climbers as well. So yeah, it's rad.
Well, you just have to give them, to be honest with you, in this climate right now, everybody's, they're spinning their wheels a little bit, but give them opportunities where, again, someone like you is actually doing something, not just posting, but doing.
Yeah.
Is, give them an opportunity, and I think most people will jump at it. So, so check it out. Young Women Who Crush on Instagram.
Yeah. And I encourage, like, if there are other people out there, like, oh, how do I start this? Like, start it, right? Like, it's tricky now with COVID for sure, but like create that space. If you have the resources, if you have the knowledge, if you're a guide, or even if you're not, if you're just somebody who loves climbing and you want to share it, like, reach out to a local gym, reach out to some local public schools. Kids need it now more than ever. And fortunately, the outdoors is a space where like we still can educate and we still can engage, because right now it's our, ironically, like our safest space. It's not that intimidating of a thing to start. And yeah, do it.
All right, Alexis, thanks so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you. Riot Rhythm is off of Treats, which is our first album. But to me, that's the track that I feel like most crosses or intersects with climbing just gets you stoked. It gets you stoked to like either climb or run or bike. And it's actually, Kathy used it this year for the trailer for No Man's Land. If I had to think about Sleigh Bells in relation to climbing, that would be the song.